Good afternoon. I'm going to give a commentary on lecture 26 of the Foundations of Esotericism. As people may have been noticing, these lectures get more and more complex, more and more dense in their aphoristic stenography, and it becomes more and more difficult to know where to limit oneself in commenting on these things. I'm not going to go through the pictures of the great rounds of evolution, but stick now to the Earth evolution. And if you remember, we are in the fourth round of Earth evolution, and within that we are in the fourth globe. And in the fourth globe of revolution there are epochs, huge races, or root races, which is really a bad word, but generic evolutionary cycles, which each of them 7 subcultures. So that each of these 7 big ages have about 15,000 years, and this is really, in Steiner's view, the beginning of Earth evolution proper in this 25th globe, which is the middle of Earth. And we have the Polarian, which is has 7 cultural epochs, the Hyperborean, which has 7 cultural epochs, and the Lemurian, which has 7 cultural epochs. And those 3 really are a repetition of the ancient sun, the ancient Saturn, the ancient sun, and the ancient moon. And through Lemuria and Atlantis, we start Earth proper. And Lemuria had 7 cultural epochs, and Atlantis had 7 cultural epochs. And Steiner names them in this lecture, the 7 cultural epochs of about 2,160 years each. And we are now in the post-Atlantean times, which at a certain level repeats itself, but also becomes more dense. And with that sort of picture in mind, we see in this particular lecture that nothing is quite straightforward. He speaks of how in the future time will speed up, that these great epochs will be quicker and quicker because of the development that the human being and creation makes. However, as he talks about becoming, in this particular lecture, I suppose there's a wonderful imagery to come in upon, which is, where do we see this entering into matter taking us? And we've been exploring the possibility, or Steiner asked us to explore this dual nature, that part of us wants to be bound up with the ideal world and the ennoblement world, but there's another driven by the moon gods, Yahweh, into becoming deeper and deeper and more deeply involved with the material world. And he says that if that impulse, which was necessary for the individuation of the human being, where we were sort of born out of spirit, veiled from spirit, died to the spirit, we would have become statues, we would have become sclerotic. And so the world leadership, the masters of wisdom and harmony, have sent other beings. We've heard of the great moon being that came, Lucifer, who brought about the principle from the moon, and then when that was reached a certain point, that was joined by, he sort of said that the leadership positions, that this battle between Yahweh and Lucifer would have kind of resulted only in destruction, and other elements were needed to be brought. So we had to absorb the wisdom, but in the future it would not be possible for wisdom alone to manifest in a form-creating way. We would have been able to build up the mineral kingdom through Lucifer, but Lucifer could not have given it life. And in that respect, a great sun being, the sun Petries, or the sun fathers, had to come, and the leader of those, or the most developed of those sun beings, the solar Petries, was known as the Christ. And therefore the sun element came. But before that, also the Mars forces had to be brought. And so he speaks of how the great leaders of different planetary spheres, as we became more and more densified in the physical world, this battle between matter and spirit, in his terms, in the esoteric terms, between Yahweh, or Jehovah, and Lucifer, required other substance to come from other planets. So we've seen how they've been in the past separations of existence, how the sun, moon, and earth separated. But if you remember, we also spoke of how Jupiter, Saturn, other beings left because it was too hard to live on the earth. And now certain substance had to be brought back. And the first substance that was brought back was the Mars sphere. So the Mars substance was brought back to the earth in the ancient Lemuria. And he asks us to imagine or to experience how when the Mars substance comes, Lucifer starts to use the Mars substance, but also it densifies into iron. And as the Christ being brings the sun substance, it densifies into gold. And then also we needed a mercury impulse. And at this point, we see that mercury is still a liquid metal, just as back in those days in Atlantis and Lemuria, gold and silver were in a liquid form and have solidified into the gold and silver in the earth. So too, as we go through this next phase of bringing new substance, new impulses to the hardening forces of that battle between Yahweh and Lucifer in us, that Mercury itself will harden as well in the future. So every time these new substances were brought by high leaders, so Lucifer brought the first substance, the Mars substances were then also brought in, the Christ brought the sun forces in, and then we also have the silver forces coming in, and now we have Mercury. So he divides the earth evolution into two halves. So we sort of, if we look at the names he gives, we've got Saturn, Sun and Moon, and then you have Mars and Mercury for Tuesday and Wednesday. So Saturday, Sunday, Monday, but Tuesday and Wednesday have Mars and Mercury. And he sort of, if you then see that he goes onto after the Earth evolution, the fifth step is Jupiter and then Venus. And he says that we have to see the Earth evolution as Mars and Mercury, how the Mars forces were brought at first, and then the sun forces. In the center of that, the Christ forces are brought towards the human being that brings the gold, the etheric gold to the earth that then densifies. But now in the second half of the earth evolution, we are in the Mercury phase, that the forces of he says here, the human astral body still lives, still to receive a third impact brought down from Mercury. Christ united his sovereignty with that of Lucifer. If one wants to ascend to the heights in order to find the way to the gods, one needs Mercury, the divine messenger. Mercury is the one who prepared the path of Christ from the middle of the Atlantean time, in order later to enter into the astral body, which have received now the mercurial element. Gold, silver, platinum, and so on are all passed through the conditions of softness and then have become solid, and so too will Mercury. The particles of the white sun ether became first fluid and then solid, and these are the veins of gold which are now in the earth. Gold is solidified sunlight, silver is solidified moonlight. All mineral substances have gradually solidified. When human beings become ever more spiritualized, quicksilver will also become solid. So again, a deep relationship between the appearance out of the seed thoughts of the spiritual world, how matter appears. And as we go now through the central, most physical, most mineral aspect of evolution, we can see how we have been coalesced, how we've crystallized out of the spiritual thought, and we are have pressed, these are all contents of earlier lectures, we have pressed the world about us outwards into stone, plant and animal, and that initially, as we saw in the last lecture, the mineral kingdom, or the first elemental kingdom and the second elemental kingdom and the third elemental kingdom carried life. Now the physical kingdom of the human being carries the life of the spirit, and as we transform, so too will then the mineral and the plant and the animal and the human kingdom be transformed as we go towards the next incarnation. But here's an interesting comment, I suppose, that has come up for me in reading this lecture and other lectures as an extended understanding of this world. Steiner is very keen for us to understand evolution as the evolution of consciousness. So, and I'm starting to see that there are kind of three phases to his understanding of the evolution of consciousness. So I've been promoting, or in these lectures so far, he's been promoting very much the evolution taking place as the seed thoughts, or the seed thoughts come out of the first elemental kingdom, that out of the spirit the material world coalesces. But then there comes a point in Lemuria, so not that long ago, in our time, in our phase, where after a certain point where everything's coalesced, so where all the mineral expressions, the mineral world, the plant world, the animal world, the human kingdom have all coalesced, evolution reverses itself. So it's no longer from seed thought to matter, but matter, I suppose we could say, this is where Rudolf Steiner, there's a thought or question where Steiner's idea of evolution and the Darwinian idea of evolution meet. Darwin sort of talks about how out of matter things become more and more complex, and Steiner in his lectures on the Gospel of St. John talks about this, that there is a moment of reversal where out of the simplicity of matter things become more and more head more and more back towards seed thoughts. So and to do that we have to evolve through the mastery of matter. So at this moment this is the third aspect of evolution, that human beings are busy imprinting matter, and in this particular lecture he then talks about how we will also be able to fill our thoughts and our perceptions out of the intellectual formations from the world around us. This is the reversal moment, and we will then imprint the new seed ideas into the mineral world, the plant world, the animal world, and ultimately the human kingdom. So three sort of phases, hard to describe. Seed thoughts moving through elementary kingdoms of life, the material world manifesting, individuation taking place, the veiling of the spirit taking place, and we're now at that place where we have to start lifting the veils. But there's a reversal of the direction of evolution that takes place. That's really important for us to pick up. It's not just the seed thought keeps evolving into matter, but eventually matter starts to pick up and evolve itself and become more and more diversified and multiplicities, I suppose, if you want to say that, the sort of the huge diversity of expression of the material world and life starts to emerge, in a sense, I think, where Darwin was trying to describe things, where he saw things coming out of the physical now into more and more complexity and more independence. And Steiner actually confirms that reversal takes place in the Lemurian time. And then as we find our individuation and we start to reconnect to our spiritual being and we start to lift the veils of our spiritual perception, as a third step of evolution, which I'm calling at this point the evolution in matter. So where the human beings and our creativity and our thoughts that we create actually start to transform matter, the mineral world, the plant world, the animal world, and eventually the human kingdom itself. So those are some of the sort of pictures. Of course, this lecture gets quite complex because he keeps going on and on about in very short sentences around things. But he says here, for example, in the first round, life was in the first elementary kingdom, and then eventually comes to our round where it's in the mineral kingdom, and then into the future, life will be imbued into the plant kingdom, into the animal kingdom, and then the human kingdom. So right now, in the fourth round, we are imbuing life into the mineral kingdom by creating it. The picture that he keeps bringing is, for example, a place that was very relevant in his time, the great cathedral in Cologne. He says that the artisans who conceived the architecture of the cathedral cut the stone, put the wood into it, the glass into it, but when that cathedral eventually disintegrates, what was put as thought into the stone will have life in it and will become the plant world in the future sun. So three aspects of evolution: the seed thoughts into matter, the reversal of matter into then complexity, and now the third step of the evolution through human creativity. Yes, one could say, as Steiner says, the human being, when we emerge from this, will have become a god and will carry our development over to Jupiter. So yes, the divinization of the human being, we could say deification through Christ. So in my PhD, that's what I'm trying to argue, that Steiner's concept of Christology, or the concept of evolution, is that the Christ has worked through evolution, through the course of history, to bring the impulse of the deification of the human being, that we may become creators in the next sun. Might be confronting, but something definitely. This is the foundations of esotericism, and it is really important for us to grasp these very important, I suppose, duties, spiritualities that is we are bound to kind of develop, and not fall prey to just thinking we are but a material being in a material world, but that we are actually a spiritual being with spiritual powers, and we must bring that to bear, and that the content of our thoughts and the feelings and imaginations and dreams of the future will bear fruit through what we imprint upon matter and the plants, and what we then imprint also upon the animal and the human kingdom. Repeating myself a bit because I can see who's watching, so I'm enjoying talking to you. Okay, have a good evening, and we're getting towards actually really difficult parts of this lecture cycle to comment upon because they're quite dense. Okay, keep well. Bye.